Welcome everyone to Melfuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about The Last of Us Season 2 Episode 5. It's called Feel Her Love. The spoilers for the episode. Yeah, okay. There's Ellie. There's Game Ellie at the end of this episode. Not the very final scene, which leads into what I presume is a flashback episode next week. But the angry Ellie, right? Screaming, using the pipe to hit Nora repeatedly, demanding to know where Abby is. That's Ellie from Last of Us Part 2. They kind of made us wait for that anger to really come out, but that was definitely her. This was pretty good. I don't think I like it quite as much as last week, which just on that, like the rating on IMDb for last week's episode is like a 6.4. Because there's a pride flag in the episode. Why are people so freaking weird? Anyway, this episode is pretty damn good, and there's scenes and moments that I think are fantastic. Particularly that confrontation with Nora towards the end is exceptional. The chemistry between Dina and Ellie is still fantastic. A couple of exchanges between them really cracked me up this episode. You know, it's haunted but empty. Oh, just like us. Funny line. Great line of dialogue. Jesse's big entrance. I was waiting for how he would show up. He actually shows up in a much more dramatic way here than he did in the game. The section that he shows up in the game is actually kind of skipped, and I can understand why, because the section in the game that they skipped where he ultimately shows up is when they're going through like a residential area, and it is before the hospital. It's like before that part. And Dina doesn't come along in the game, so it's just Ellie, and it's basically the part of the game that introduces the ideas that sometimes the wolf troops will have dogs, which will make sneaking around harder. That's like one of the mechanics in the game. So that section is really about that. So there's a lot of combat in this residential area, and that's where Jesse appears. Here, of course, they did something different. They end up with the stalkers reappearing from earlier in the season, which obviously they do a good job here. They're actually way more deadly in the show than they are in the game, because in the game you have to be able to fight them, you have to be able to win. Here it feels like they're pretty unstoppable, and it's only because Jesse showed up, was able to fire off some shots, that they were able to survive. I think it is a little debatable if maybe they were a bit too reckless with going through this building, even though they had a reason, which is that it's the one place it's not been guarded heavily by the WLF. However, maybe there's a reason why they don't feel the need to do it, and they just think, oh, it'll be a few infected. But if it was a few infected, why wouldn't they just go in and clear it out? Especially since, you know, this seems to be something that they've been doing for years at this point. And the opening even kind of hints at that, which I'll talk about as well. The opening is... it's been very... I think this is something they established way back at the start of the first season, maybe episode 2 of the first season. Was this idea of like doing like a standalone scene at the start of the episode which fills in a part of the history and is relevant to something later on, but is pretty standalone in its own way. That's what the opening of this episode kinda was, which I guess I'll talk about first. Or not first. I've been talking for a few minutes, but anyway. So they're setting up the spores, right? So I even mentioned in the last episode that the spores were a thing. That spores were a thing in the game, and they always were, right? Even when we start off in the first game, well, at least when we start off in the future part of the timeline, the spores have always been a thing, and they're aware of them. They sort of can tell they're going into an area with the spores, and they put on gas masks. The opening of this episode sets up the idea that the spores are something that has come along later, or at the very least hasn't been discovered until later. Now, admittedly, this is still a bit far back, because I believe the woman in charge here, in this opening scene, who is asking for, like, answers, right? She's questioning who was the on-site superior officer who was in charge of clearing out the hospital. I believe that's the woman who then goes on to be the SCAR's leader, right? I think that's her. I think that's the prophet, based on the graffiti we saw in this episode. So I think this is still a bit further back. Especially since the hospital's clearly, they've barricaded the basement areas and they're using the rest of it, and we see that in the later part of the episode when we get to the Nora stuff. But she explains that Leon, her best, was sent down to clear out the basement areas, and level 1 had nothing. Kind of strange how quiet it was, but whatever. Went down to level 2. They said there was something going on. There's stuff all over the walls. Keep going. Kill the we're there to kill the infected, so just do it. But then and this was great performing, I thought, this sequence where she kind of like really sells this idea of like recounting him saying over the radio, "It's in the air," and how terrifying that is. When up until this point they've all believed that it's only through physical biting and maybe scratching, but certainly biting, that you can pass this. Presumably if you did a blood transfusion, that would probably do it as well, but why anyone would do that intentionally is open for questions. So this, I think, was a great moment. It was exciting as someone who played the games, realizing that they're introducing the spores and that they're going to do something with that. And it was kind of important for the scene with Nora towards the end, unless they were really going to change how that worked. And I'm glad they didn't change that, because I love that moment of realization on Nora's face. Like the moment where she kind of is like, "You've killed us both," and Ellie just walks up, almost kind of cocky, like, "Have I?" And like she realized, you can see the moment on Nora's face where she clocks, or she starts to notice, wait, why does she not look like she's struggling to breathe? Why does she look like she's fine? Oh wait, you're her. You're the immune girl. And I think that moment is absolutely fantastic, as is all the stuff with comes after. But just to finish off that opening, the realization at the end of the scene that the guy she's talking about, this woman, Park, she's talking about her son. She sealed in her son, because the scene kind of starts with this idea that all the troops think that this Park character is going to get in trouble because she seemingly has sacrificed like a little squad of people in the basement. But when she explains why she did it, like the other lady here is like, "Yeah, you did the right thing. Sorry about your son." So it's like, okay. And they also say, "Don't tell anyone. Only people who need to know find this out." So this kind of sounds like the knowledge of this maybe isn't that widespread. That said, Nora seemed to know about it, because Nora wasn't trying to go to the basement. She just tried to go into the elevator shaft. The elevator just happened to fall down, and they ended up down there. So I think that's that thing. So to just sort of stick with this line of thinking and going to the end of the episode, the red lighting, Ellie walking in center frame towards the camera, towards Nora, very intimidating. It does feel like something has changed. Obviously, it's really important that she made a conscious choice. After kind of debating whether they should turn back and things like that throughout the episode, when she got separated from Dina and Jesse, Ellie made the choice. She saw the hospital and realized she could get there, and she made the choice to go there. That's a very pivotal moment, I think, for the story of this season and for Ellie's character. This is a moment where she decided not to go with Dina, who is now injured because she got an arrow to the leg, and go and discuss about Tommy, because Tommy came with Jesse to try and find these two, which is a little change from the game. And in the game, Tommy actually left first to come and try and get revenge for Joel. Now, Tommy didn't have any kids in the game, though, so it does make sense that he wouldn't be as gung-ho. But it does also... But I do buy that he would want to come and rescue Ellie. That does make sense to me. So, she made that choice. That was a conscious choice she made, and I think that's a big pivotal point. But more importantly, I think the level of determination on her here... Obviously, the first encounter with Nora is pretty good, if maybe a little rushed. In fact, if that's maybe my biggest complaint about the episode, is that I think her getting into the hospital and that initial conversation with Nora feels oddly quick to me. It feels like they're almost speeding through the dialogue, like I'm getting cliff notes almost. And I'm like, there should be more pauses here. There should be more awkwardness and like it felt like by the time Nora said on "the bitch got what he deserved," because she says something like that at the end about Joel, it felt like that should have like hit really hard, as if she'd been kind of being more sympathetic to the audience for most of the conversation. But instead, it came so quick relative that it felt like a little flatter than I think it was supposed to. Luckily, though, I think the confrontation when she's in the spores and she's sick and she's refusing to give up Abby's whereabouts, so she's loyal to her friend till the end, which is an interesting character bit, because this is a character we've only seen a couple times and now she's dead. Well, I mean, it cuts away, but like like if you think Ellie left her alive, unless they've changed things, I would be very surprised if they did. She's pretty done for. I mean, even if Ellie didn't, she's down there with the spores and infected, so she's a goner. But yeah, I'd like to say the rage on Ellie here is a big thing, but more importantly, her last ditch effort to try and not even like save herself, because at this point she knows she's dead. She's in the spores. But it almost feels like she's trying to like talk Ellie out of doing what she's going to do, because she knows she wants Abby. And she's like, hey, do you know what Joel did? Joel, like, killed a bunch of people in the hospital. He killed the one doctor who had a chance of making a cure from you. He shot him in the head. And Ellie very coldly says, I know. Which I think is a big moment. Now, obviously, I knew she knew. But I think it's a very big moment for people who are watching the show who haven't played the game, because I think it's definitely been left ambiguous. If anything, it's been left leading towards the idea that she never really knew. And I think next episode's going to, we're getting flashbacks. I suspect we're going to get into kind of that discovery. But I do think it adds a very different dimension to her wanting revenge for Joel, in the context that she knew what he'd done and still wants the revenge anyway. That it doesn't matter that he did something arguably objectively very bad. He did it for her, and in some level that's maybe even more motivating to like, like she's the only one who will stand up for him. Although Dina's pretty gung-ho about standing up for Joel as well. Dina tells a story about her mother and sister being killed and how she shot the guy that did it when she was 8. And talks about how if she hadn't killed him, and especially if she'd saw him do it, like, if she actually witnessed him kill them, she would be hunting him her entire life. So, if anything, in a weird way, she's kind of talking Ellie into further revenge at that point. But it is an interesting dynamic, and I think their dynamic in the show is very good. I think Dina, as a character, has definitely come out a bit stronger in the show versus the game. She was a good character in the game, but I think in the show there's a bit more agency, there's a bit more character development, and it feels there's just a bit more bite to it. I know some people were upset they took away. There was a scene in the game where they go into a synagogue and Dina talks about how her family was Jewish. I know some people were disappointed that they took that out, but I suspect, they've been taking out a lot of things from the Seattle stuff, because there was a lot of stuff that you go through in the game for gameplay's sake. And I do think last episode was paced pretty well, and it would have been a bit of an extra thing. Whereas this episode, I do feel like they maybe not even like, I don't even want another section back in. Like, I don't want the Hillcrest residential area section in the show. I don't think it serves a purpose. But maybe just make it feel like it was more difficult for Ellie to get into the hospital. I think that's the big thing, is make it feel like it was a bit more of a real struggle to get in there, so that when she's able to sneak up behind Nora, it feels like a big deal that she's gotten to like the goal. They did set up at least that she would know which part of the building she would be in. But I think a bit more of Ellie sneaking around and just narrowly getting by until she gets there would have went a long way to make it feel like a turmoil. In fact, this show's got a history of this, because that was my complaint with the season 1 finale, is that it felt like Joel went through the hospital, different hospital obviously, but he went through the hospital a bit too easily, and it should have felt like a struggle. I kind of felt the same way here with Ellie getting to Nora. It should have felt like more of a series of hurdles that she was just narrowly getting by. So yeah, if I have to sum up the complaints I have with the Last of Us TV adaptation, is that whenever the characters are in a hospital, everything's too easy. But like I said, the back half of it though, once they start chasing, once they get down into the spores, I love that. I love the setup of the spores at the start of the episode. That stuff's great. I do think it's interesting. I think Dina getting the arrow to the leg is a good way of like now her not being able to come for more like intentional fights. Instead of being left behind because she's kind of sick with the pregnancy, it's like we've done something different here where she wants to do that stuff, but now she's kind of forced to not, because she's going to be slower, she's going to be limping, maybe, whatever it is. So I think that's super interesting. I will say all that stuff in the park, which obviously the WLF, the Wolves, don't go into. I love how this looked. I will say, because I'm watching Not everyone's watching it this way, but I was watching, in Dolby Vision. And this stuff in the park looked absolutely fantastic because it was so dark and like everything was in super darkness, just a little bit of light here or there. And then the scars are walking about with these bright torches that were really popping. Like it really felt super like atmospheric and dynamic. It felt great. The show typically looks very good. Even the stuff in the hospital when it first cuts to Nora and she's like working on a patient. The lighting there was even super moody. Like there's a lot of like movies and TV that don't embrace like shadows as much as they should. Like where like contrast is what makes things look good. So you want to have parts of the image be darker and like pitch black effectively. You just want some stuff to be lit. You want to give the image depth. And I think this episode had a series of moments that reminded me of that, or capitalized and made good use of contrast and image depth. So good shout out. I mean, obviously there's a lot of natural scenes in this type of show where there's a lot of like sneaking around in the dark with their torches, and by torches in this case I mean flashlights. Flashlights are just called torches here, but torches are also called torches. There's not another word for those. They're both just kinds of torch. But like the flames of the torches in the park look fantastic, and I like everything in this episode looked great. The theater set again just looks like the game. It's insane how much it reminds me of how that game looks. But yeah, I think just making it a bit more difficult to get to Nora and get inside the hospital, since it does feel like such an imposing force with all these guards, guard dogs, all that stuff. Like have it be a little bit more of a gauntlet to get in there. Especially since this episode was even shorter than the last one. And HBO, I don't feel like typically do that. I mean, the first several episodes of the season were all about an hour long. That tends to be what HBO does. And then all of a sudden, we're getting these shorter episodes. And I was fine with it last week because I honestly didn't think anything was poorly paced last week. I think this week, though, I felt it rushed a little bit. And I think just an extra few minutes making it really difficult to get into the hospital, if not even like a full 10 minutes, I don't know, would have really sold that to me. Because, it should feel challenging, it should feel tough. And I think this show does really well at that in a lot of specific sequences, but every so often it feels like it takes a little bit of a shortcut just to get to the next part of the plot. And I do think the survival nature of it is part of what we're doing. But anyway, the atmosphere of like the whistling in the forest, and obviously we see them kill someone, like one of the wolves, I assume, with a big sickle and like hang him up. So he's it's just basically what we saw the aftermath of in the TV station with all the intestines hanging out and them hanging up. Like we get a good sense of what this is. It is interesting though, just to think about how maybe the discovery of the spores is in part maybe what leads to this split off of the scars and how they end up becoming a thing, or how the prophet becomes a thing, perhaps maybe more specifically. But regardless, I did like a lot of that stuff. As far as anything else, I mean, I think that's most of what I feel like I need to talk about. It's a really enjoyable episode, and there's specific sequences in here that are fantastic. Just a couple of things felt a little rushed, and the fact that the episode is shorter and could have done with maybe another 5-10 minutes to like make those things feel a bit more difficult would have been, I think, really good. Obviously, the final scene of them cutting from the anger of Ellie in the red, right, bathed in the red light. We cut from that to a flashback where she wakes up when she was still living in the house with Joel in Jackson, and he's happy, she's happy, and then we cut to credits. I think setting up, because there is flashbacks in the game. They are split up in the game. There's several flashbacks. I'm getting the feeling that we might be getting, if not all of them, I think we're going to get like more than like one of them. I think we're going to get like a full episode of most of the flashbacks. I can see them saving maybe one or two little things for just like a standalone scene, like maybe next season. But I think this is going to be the bulk of them, at least from the first half of the game anyway. So very curious to see that. I'm excited. There's a lot of nice stuff coming if that is the case. But that's my thoughts. Yeah, it was a quicker discussion because it was a quicker episode, frankly. But really good. I think all the horror elements were done really well, though. Stalkers were great. The discovery of the spores had a lot of impact. Because in the game, it's just kind of taken for granted that that's always been the case, that there are like an airborne version of it that you have to stay away from. But again, it's this idea of Ellie having the superpower, which reminds me, actually, I really liked Dina saying at one point, "I'm going to go in there first and check it out," and Ellie, like, very sarcastically points out, "Maybe I should do it because I'm the one that can't get infected." And Dina's like, "Yep, that's a good point. Why am I being an idiot?" So yeah, I think like I had a good time. It's definitely not as strong as last week's episode, though. Just a little bit weaker in the pacing, and getting into the hospital felt a bit in the easy side. It felt like a little bit of a shortcut, or maybe a bit of a cop out, even to make it just be like magically she goes in one little opening, cut to she's already behind Nora. I think that needed to have a little bit more of a lead in and a build up. But hey. So let me know what you thought of this episode in the comments. Like and subscribe, all that usual YouTube crap that everyone tells you. The main thing, though, is you can support all the content either over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and help keep all the reviews coming, both here and over at MailFuzz Movies. Support from any direction is greatly appreciated, though. So if you want to do, YouTube membership or super thanks or anything like that, all of it is very much appreciated. So thank you for joining me. I'll see you guys next time. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?